All right, we're going to give a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just wanted to first thank everybody for coming. Those of you joining online, thank you for taking time out of your day. We appreciate you taking the time to show interest in understanding how your rates are derived and what goes into deciding how the rates are determined. My name is James. I'm the Director of Operations, so I oversee the field operations, the production, and all the kind of construction activities that happen in the field. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to be informative. There's no decisions that are going to be made tonight, so we hope to educate you, and we're going to have some discussions by our General Manager, Dan Jaggers. We'll have a little discussion and presentation by our General Manager, and then our Director of Engineering, Mark Swanson, will go over some of the capital improvement projects that impact our rate and some of the activities that are going on with capital. And then we'll have our consultant from Water Resources Economics who did the independent study for us and their findings and what went into their kind of study and their recommendation for the rate that was presented to our board and what's going to be taken to the public hearing on April 24th for discussion with the board and ultimately a vote. If there is any wish to make make a formal opposition to the proposed rate, we'd be happy to take that written opposition tonight. If that's your intent, we could take that in. We'd be happy to receive that tonight. We'd like to, if you haven't, we do have you written down as a question, so we'll take that a little later tonight. And with that, I guess I'll turn it over to our general manager.
Certainly. Well, thank you for coming. I see a number of faces in the audience, and I want to say we appreciate being here tonight, and your presence shows that you care about the water rates. And we do too, because it helps us provide service to the community, and we deeply appreciate your concerns. I also want to reiterate that, you know, water rates are not just numbers. It allows us to do a job to service the community and provide service of a vital resource to our ratepayers and constituents. And wanted to thank you for being here and talk about some of the reasons why rates and rate changes are necessitated through time as well as right now. I think as we all recognize, the last few years have created some significant inflationary impacts to most every business, including our business. Big elements that affect us are benefits, insurance, labor costs, and electricity. One of our primary expenditures is electrical costs, which has increased significantly since our last rate study and has some impacts. And then we have a number of aging infrastructure projects that need to be continue to be updated. What we're doing tonight is the beginning of sort of the activity related to a rate study, a Prop 218 hearing, and then moving forward the activity of approving a rate increase. I think that's what the study has been found to show is required to service our needs for the community. We began this. There's a graphic on the screen that sort of identifies the district's path towards the next couple weeks, and potentially and hopefully at the subsequent of a successful public hearing on April 24th, 6 o'clock here at our boardroom, the approval of a rate increase to satisfy our upcoming cost and needs to service the community. But we began this journey in April of 2024, and we've sort of migrated across the last few years, the last year or so, to today to get to the path of the analysis and the completion. Staff and our consultant, WRE, has done a significant dive into the costs that we've seen and the increases we've seen due to sort of the economic times we're living in. State law requires certain activities take place. That's specifically Water Code 31007, and it requires all public entities such as ourselves to analyze rates to ensure that they're adequate to cover the cost of providing water. We have done this 5 years ago, and we're here again today. Our rate path has typically been a 5-year process, and before that, the previous general manager did not do a rate study in 2015, but we did do one in around 2010. And so we continue to see increases to costs, and so we're working our way forward to sort of satisfying those needs, which will be presented by WRE later. There'll be a discussion of just, I think, well, I'll reiterate, I don't know if it's in your proposal, but the cost just to sort of service the basic cost increase due to inflation without doing any of the needed improvements to maintain the system is 6% or so per year due to inflationary pressure. But anyway, so what's been happening, you know, lately? Our last rate study had 3% annual inflation as a general operating cost. I've got some numbers here and I'll run through them. We had a 4.5% annual estimate for salaries and benefits with no staffing changes, and a 5% annual cost for energy increased, and those have been significantly impacted in the last 5 years due to sort of the economics of today since COVID-19. And we've seen inflation across all areas, including 7 and 9% salary inflation in CPI, although we've done some things to mitigate costs over the past 5 years with negotiations with our staff members. In addition, you know, sort of observationally, inflation has hit every sector, and we need to update our rates to compensate for those activities, including increased labor cost due to things such as minimum wage prices in California being updated and being competitive in the market. Some other elements that we've seen significant increases are equipment and property insurances have increased 310% over the last 5-year period. I think everybody's seeing that. Electricity costs were started at 1.6 million in 2020, and today we're paying $3.1 million a year, so they've effectively doubled in cost. And of course, fuel costs have gone up. And so at the end, you know, we've done what we can do to control costs. We've done a lot of work in-house. We've shed a lot of labor debt by leveraging the developer deposits during this last period, but we're at a point where we need to continue to move things forward and want to make sure that we satisfy the financial needs of the district. We're working to do things like minimize costs for fleet maintenance activities and making sure our processes and procedures provide the lowest overall cost to the district, as well as our ratepayers. And we're also working to leverage technology to make sure that we maximize technological opportunities to minimize future labor costs. And one of the things we did, just to keep things clear and concise, is we hired an outside consultant who's with us tonight, Sanjay Gar, who will speak later, who provided independent analysis of where we're at and where we need to go to make sure that we're solvent into the future. One of the elements we don't want to become, you hear a lot about insolvency over time because of lack of cooperation and the inability to meet your service needs and cost. And so we appreciate, Sanjay, we appreciate your work at Water Resources Economics, and look forward to the continued support as we move through this process. And at the end of the day, we appreciate you for looking at the challenges in our operating budget, capital improvement needs. And with that, I think our current financial position from staff's perspective, as well as the analysis, identifies a need to increase rates effectively, the need to sort of satisfy the projected activities and maintenance and operational needs of the district is about 15% a year compounded per year. And we understand even today, at the completion of our rate study, there are economic uncertainties with things such as the recently talked about tariffs and stuff that have an unintended consequence, but we're interested in moving this forward and weathering the storm without further analyzing those things. And one of the elements the district and the board of directors did to sort of balance needs versus activities of rate increase was to fund our capital improvement program, which we're doing as sort of a pay-as-you-go activity with some debt service to create intergenerational equity, so the people of today aren't paying for future people. We spread it across 30 years or so. And um, and so we think we've got a good balance, but our capital program is funded at a 65% rate activity. So we identify a cost of 100%, and what we know today, that's potentially low if there is impacts to tariffs, but the board has selected a pathway forward of a 65% funding and asked staff to prioritize projects and find creative ways via grants and other things to help satisfy the funding to the community. And with that, we have a lot of upcoming challenges. We have some new regulations that have impacted our supplies, which include changes to the maximum contaminant levels for certain chemical constituents. We've got some avoidance activities. It's related to chromium-6 in the water, and PFAS is coming in the near future, and the state has instituted over the last decade or so some conservation laws that get implemented across the next 20 years, and those will basically require conservation over time to lower the overall use of water. We have run a bunch of numbers for our service area, and we suspect that the state is legislating to achieve a 25 to 30% reduction in demand from our ratepayers. And other districts at the moment are utilizing a methodology of looking at your landscaping, calculating the landscape factor and the evapotranspiration rates, calculating a budget and applying a budget to you, which adjusts over time to achieve those conservation. And they have a number of entities I've reviewed have 4 rate tiers. And when you get into the upper 2 tiers, they're on the order of $6 and $13 a unit of sale. I think we're in a couple dollar to $3 a unit of sale at the end of the day. And so doesn't mean the state won't drive us there, but we have all these challenges to overcome. And tonight begins the education of the community to sort of satisfy the requirements of everything we just stated, which seems like quite a lot. And I know it keeps me awake at night. And, one of the things we have looked at is we've looked at our rates compared to other agencies. We believe we're lower than average, and we're on the bottom end currently, and we're even with our rate adjustments in the near term show up in Mr. Gar's data sets. We'll still be below the middle of the pack or at the middle of the pack, depending on sort of what your water use is. And we hope to achieve high quality water supply at the lowest reasonable rate. And one of the other elements we've looked at here lately is one of the ways to measure yourself against other districts from the aspect of efficiency of operation is a look at employees per connection. And we're sort of a full service activity. We have, our math suggests we have 22,000 connections or so, and we're at about 472 connections per employee. And a lot of the other districts that we compare ourselves to regionally are as low as 160 to 170 to 350. And so I think when we look at 7 or 8 other entities in the vicinity, we are by far the at the spot where we have more connections per employee, which means to me we're doing more with the same number of people to service customers, And so those are things that we're proud of here. Rates are always tough, but they're necessities. And every time I go to places like the grocery store, I'm surprised at how much we've seen inflation hit our pocketbooks, and we're aware of it here, and we're trying to be as cost effective as possible. And so with that, we've got a big CIP program. Our Director of Engineering, Mark Swanson, is here. I see Um, Mostly staff members online, and I see one person in the audience who's not a staff member. So I'm going to say we're happy to have you here. Welcome. Um, we're prepared to talk an awful lot, but I guess at this point, um, maybe we'll hold back on the capital improvement program elements a little bit. Let Mr. Sanjay Gar talk, and then once that goes through, maybe we'll just ask if you have any particular focus questions, ma'am. And if you do, we'll work to educate you. Alternatively, we'll talk generally about our capital improvement program list, and we can talk in earnest. But I think the big impacts we've seen, just to finish off, are we have sort of 4 or 5 primary costs. We import state water from our local wholesaler, the San Gregorio Pass Water Agency. Those rates kind of pass through, but we've got some increases in those in our rates that we think are reasonable. And electrical costs, we've made projections. I think we just got notified by Southern California Edison that our this year's rate or the next rate increase will approach 15% in 1 year, which is pretty significant because we're spending $3.1 million a year in electrical energy costs. So 15% on $3.1 million.
That's correct.
$450,000 in a shot. It's hard to project those things. Labor costs, health insurance benefits. We are using consultants to a large degree to offset those costs to keep sort of fully booked employee costs down. But we need a minimum contingent to service the community properly. So with that, Sanjay, you want to take it away? Yeah, sure.
And you can hear me, right? I'm going to stand up if you don't mind. I'm going to go to the podium. I'll get the, there we go. Up. Appreciate that. You can go into slide. Thank you very much. So as Dan mentioned, we conducted a rate study. We looked at the financial needs of this agency, and we asked ourselves, how do we maintain the health of the system? One of the challenges with running a water system is that we're dealing with aging infrastructure. Most people don't realize this, but water is one of the most capital-intensive products. So none of us are at home right now, but there's a lot of infrastructure to make sure water is available to our house. And that water that goes to our house is pressurized. When you turn on the tap, it doesn't like leak out, it comes out. It also meets EPA water quality standards. And it's also there available in case of an emergency, fire, hottest day. So it has all this infrastructure behind it. A lot of that infrastructure is old, actually very old. And so what we're always doing is we're always repairing, maintaining that system and improving that system. And that costs money. Similar to a car. If you had a car that's 20 or 30 years old and you did a great job, eventually you need to buy a new car. And that's the challenge that we're facing. So we'll go to the next slide. And so today's discussion is really going over the financial plan. We developed a model in Excel. We looked at many different scenarios and asked ourselves, what's the most appropriate scenario? Because it's always a balancing act. It's always about, it's the need of the system, but it's also about affordability and minimizing impacts to customers. And it's that balance act where, what can we get away with that meets that need, make sure that water's available 24/7, it's safe, it's there for emergency, but at the same time, we're trying to minimize that impact. And so that's why we went through many different scenarios with the board, going over that. And we have a proposed financial plan scenario that Dan mentioned, which is 65% of the capital improvement plan. It's not 100%. We're not doing the full replacement of the car. We're just fixing only the key aspects of the car that we think is needed. Then we show you the rates, and then we do a customer impact, because it's always important to understand. We want to be transparent here. We have nothing to hide. And then we also want to do a survey. Well, how do we stand with our peers? So the financial rate study, the last rate that was adopted and increased was in calendar year. We see CY's calendar year in 2024. Operating capital expense have increased. There's also additional staff that's needed to make sure we maintain the system. One of the challenges with running a water system is also the increased regulatory standards that's needed. Dan mentioned that both from a water quality perspective and also from a quantity perspective, making sure that we use water reasonably. And that costs money, that costs staff. In addition, we have capital improvement plans that's needed. Facility here is the headquarters right now. It's old. Not all the staff can fit in here. And so it'll be better and more efficient for the agency if there was one site area where everyone can work out of, and be more efficient in meeting the needs of the agency. So that's the plan in the future. There's also well replacement. This financial plan does not expand the recycling system, which is the non-potable water use. As I mentioned, increased regulatory requirement, and then just the overall reduction in water use. It's a sort of interesting dynamic we have because we want to make sure we use that water reasonably. We want to make sure it's available for tomorrow. But as we reduce the demand, our demand for water, the price actually goes up because that's how we collect our revenue. And so we always get into this little bit of a circular challenge on where we want to reduce demand, but then it has this financial impact on us in that we have to increase rates to make sure we have the revenue in place. So these are 4 quadrants that we have of the financial plan. I'm going to talk about the top left corner first, which is the blue. There's a dark blue and a light blue and a black line. The dark blue is the operating costs. That's just the cost to have staff, electricity on. It doesn't deal with maintaining the system and improving the car. That's the light blue. The dark line is the revenue that we have. If you notice, that black line is just barely, it's not even sometimes covering the blue section. So that means our revenue that we're collecting from our rates basically is barely, or in the future, not even collecting to pay for the operating system of this enterprise, of turning on the lights. So we need to increase rates just to meet operating costs. We also need to increase rates to fund our capital needs. And that's the challenge that we're having here. Because of that, then I'm going to go now to the right top corner. Those are green bars, and if you know they're going negative quickly, we're going to run out of money. We don't have enough money to fund the capital improvement plans. We don't have money to fund capital operating costs. That black line up there is the reserve target that we would like to have. So when you manage a water system, there's a lot of liability. There's a lot of infrastructure, and if something goes wrong, we want to be able to fix it right away. So that's why we need some money just in case of an emergency. We don't need much, but we do need some. And then we have the capital improvement plan. This is showing it at 100% capital expenditure. We did go through many scenarios with the board about which plan makes sense, looking at different financing options with debt, capital expenditure. And then the next slide basically shows that proposed plan where we're basically doing 65% of the CIP needs. And my eyesight isn't that great, so I have to go look at my presentation over here to see the numbers. And we're funding, and we're going to issue $55 million worth of debt. There's pros and cons with debt issuance. There's a couple of good pros for debt issuance. One is that it minimizes impact in the short term. So that's good because we don't want to have big increases. It also helps with that intergenerational equity that Dan mentioned, because then future individuals who join the system will have to pay. There is a cost, though, of course, with interest associated with that. By doing that, though, we can get by with a 15% increase. That 15% increase basically gives us the revenue that we need to fund the operating costs and fund the capital improvement plan. We're funding basically $68 million worth of capital plans over the next 5 years. That's critical to make sure that we have water is available and safe. So based on that information, we go to the next slide. We show you the proposed rates. Now, I know the board, I've heard the board say this many times, they're very concerned about minimizing impacts. I know that they're going to do their due diligence to see if these are what the board would consider for adoption. I suspect the board will be coming back to Dan in a couple of years and saying, hey, can we implement something a little bit lower in the year 3 or 4? So that is something I know the board has mentioned before, and I suspect they will be looking at. But this is the maximum amount that that we can implement if the board adopted them. And this is the fixed meter charge. Most individuals have a 5/8 inch meter, and that's the first line. Next is the fire line. Fire charges are for those individuals that have property that's fire sprinklers, private property, hospitals, schools, commercial establishments. So most likely it doesn't affect you. And then we have the quantity charge. The quantity charge is based on what a billing unit we call HCF. We have 3 tiers here. As you can see, the lowest one is around $1. It goes up to almost $2 or $3. We have different customer classes, which is normal. And again, these rates would be the rates that that the board could potentially adopt. And then they can decide to implement them a little bit later on, year 3 and 4, potentially a lower rate. Based on that, we go to the next slide. And this is the pass-through. As mentioned, there are additional costs that the agency has that they will pass through. These are estimates that we think will occur. One of the challenges, though, is that there's so many unknowns, especially with electrical costs and San Gregorio. But these are some of the increases there. So what does this mean to you as a customer? I mean, we've talked a lot about financial needs. What are we talking about, and how do we compare to our peers? So the next slide shows what the typical customer uses. This is a 5/8 inch meter, which most of you have. This is looking at 30 CCF for 2 months. So this is a bi-monthly billing period. And what we're showing you here is that currently your bill is at $93.17. It'll go up to $109.14. Again, that's a 2-month billing period. And you can see that your rate is still one of the lowest in the community of all these different peers that we have. Now, one of the things is all these different agencies, they're all in the midst of potentially looking at rate studies, doing additional increases. But as you can see, you're still one of the lowest among these peers. The next slide shows that information now for a 1-inch meter. A 1-inch meter is usually individuals who have a newer house, they have a fire sprinkler, a bit larger house. And then we can look at that individual, and you can see it goes from 126 to 147. Again, this is over a 2-month billing period. Again, it's still one of the lowest rates in the service area. So this shows that, you know, we need to increase rates, unfortunately, but you're still one of the most competitive in providing water service. We also looked at commercial accounts, which is the next slide. This is an example of a 2-inch meter. So this would be like a strip mall, potentially, irrigation meter, potentially. This individual customer would use 500 CCF. And again, you can see that it's still in the medium or slightly below. That's pretty much it for my presentation that I have. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dan to wrap it up. And then we're interested in hearing any comments or questions that people may have.
James, did we have a public comment?
We do. Ms. Torres.
Excuse me. I wrote a comment, and basically, I understand that what you did, it's still, and understanding it still doesn't make me like it, because like $30 over a 5-year period.
Yeah, we appreciate that. You know, the unfortunate reality of today, and I'll tell you some elements that this district takes seriously. Well, Mr. Gar was talking, I was thinking about my history here. I've been here since 2012. We've worked really diligently to be cost effective for the community, and historically our employees have generally been behind the local area pay scales, you know, and we've done some things to make some adjustments here in the last few months to bring them at least level to the average, but we're not way out in front of anybody. Our district began life out here in 1886 or so as the Beaumont Land and Water Company. We've been in this community for 140 years or so, I guess, at this point. We became the Beaumont Irrigation District in 1919 through 21. I think we finally solidified the act in 21, but we've been here since the beginning. Our predecessor owned all the land, divided the town, and sold it all off, developed the water system to support the community, and has been operating actively here for those many years to provide service to the community. That creates a very robust area of repairs, because we have a lot of older pipes in the older parts of town, and we have a lot of newer pipes in the newer parts of town. And so the development community, I didn't mention it before, A lot of people take issue with all the growth and think it costs the ratepayers to service the new houses with new facilities. But development community pays for their increased opportunity. And to that point, they pay for new wells, new reservoirs, new pipelines. They install a lot of their own pipelines, and they pay as they go. And currently, I think we have about 45 million or so in a restricted account to build the facilities necessary to provide for that future opportunity. So really, our rates pay for things that need to be replaced that the existing community utilizes, as well as operational activities and meeting regulational requirements and paying for energy. And so I thought it was important to mention those things, and I was remiss before. You know, one of the elements we've done to lower cost in the community, we continue to look for opportunities. We've upgraded the water meters. We've metered water more accurately. We've repaired pipelines since I've been here since 2012, fairly actively in the older parts of town. And we believe we've reduced the leakage in the community by about 500 acre feet a year. That's what our water supply analysis, we have to do that to the state every year. That equates to a $200,000 savings. We pay $399 a year currently to import it. And so we don't miss any opportunities to find the savings where we can. But it's a struggle to run a business, which this ultimately is, and maintain a long-term satisfactorily funded opportunity to meet the needs of the community. I've been in the water industry as a consulting engineer for 22 years before I came here. I've been here for 13. And my whole career has been based in water and wastewater treatment, supplies, planning. And everybody takes water for granted until the fire hydrants aren't running in Pacific Palisades and places like that. And it's why are you having trouble? You know, and what we want to do is balance the cost with the community needs. And we got really lucky. If you were out here in 2020, 2021, when the Apple Fire and the El Dorado Fire burned through, the Apple Fire started at the north end of our service area and burned east. And then a month later, the El Dorado Fire started in Yucaipa and burned back into our service area. We worked very diligently with CAL FIRE and all the local fire communities to make sure we did what we needed to do to service the community. And those are all elements we take very seriously. And the things we're looking to fund is to maintain our system to provide those opportunities too. I know it's a big hot topic these days. The night of the the Apple Fire, Friday night, Mr. Bean was one of the first people to call it in because it's right there. And Mr. Swanson and I came out in the evening. All of our staff deployed, did a great job. We had 11 leaks in our system because of the water extractions created so much flow and so fast that the older lines have issue, and our staff worked diligently all weekend. But those are the things we take seriously, and those are the things these things supply. And you know, I feel like I'm on a bit of a soapbox, but I'm really proud of our district and the level of commitment here to do things at a high quality and low cost. And I don't like a 15% rate either, but I think it's the lowest reasonable opportunity to make it happen. And if I could find a way to do it less expensively, I would do it. In fact, our field staff, one of them's in the audience, resides in a double wide office trailer, and it was in such poor shape last year. We basically rehabbed it just to give them a revised opportunity without burdening the district ratepayers. It's not a permanent solution, but our staff is committed to doing things at the lowest cost, and we're looking for long-term solutions. Some of those are funded in this rate, but they get delivered over time. And I'll say, you've got great people working to provide water for this region, and they're all committed. I appreciate it. I wish the rates weren't 15%. I wish they were 0. But you know, that's not the economic reality of today, unfortunately. I've stopped eating eggs here recently. I'll just leave it at that. You know, it's 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 interesting how expensive things have gotten. So with that, we're happy to answer any other questions you have. Um, we have binders of material, and I don't see anybody else online, I don't believe. And so um,
Okay, other than construction of a new facility, what are the capital improvements?
so Ren, give me just a second. Would you open Windows Explorer? Sorry, would you open file? Plug. I have a copy of it. Actually, maybe since it's just you, Mark, would you come up and help him find the CIP schedule? Yeah, we're going to bring it up on the screen, but I'm going to walk over and show you sort of the capital replacement activities. And then we'll show it on screen. I see a couple people. You should, Mark, it's either the whole budget and just get to the bottom. Yeah, and so we have a number of activities. So I'm going to start talking. We'll bring it up here in a moment. Let me add. I'll come right back. Okay. So we have in our annual budget, we project a 5-year forward-looking capital improvement budget where we summarize all of our projects and costs, and we show sort of funding requirements. Things maybe put it towards my mouth. And so basically, we identify through a master planning effort, and these are our expenditures by year, but every project that we envision is cast in a series of schedules, and they're in the back of that too. But those schedules identify expenditures over time for each project. Some of them are potable infrastructure projects of replacements of existing facilities. And then, pardon me, and it's on the screen for those who are following online. And then it includes a schedule. So they're in the rate study, which you have a copy of, but this is where they start life at. And this is straight out of our annual budget. It's on our website, and it runs through all these projects, and these are the dollars per year, kind of in order to get the work done, sort of a schedule of activities, so to speak, for funding. And then it continues. As you can see, it's fairly extensive. And then it also casts forth, and I got to put on my glasses because it's so small, but we have our information system, technical stuff, server room updates, stuff you need for cybersecurity, SCADA and automatic meter reading infrastructure projects and things we're doing there. SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition. It's what runs all of our field mounted equipment, so we can see it remotely on tablets and stuff, and minimize deployment of personnel, save money on labor costs. IT field operations projects, AC, heating, everything that we do is cast in this schedule. Vehicles and equipment, we actually had a projection for vehicles and equipment, but we're moving to a lease to minimize the burden over time. We did an economic analysis. We took it to the board last night, and they voted on it. It looked economically cheaper than buying vehicles outright. Because once you're into it, you start to realize some savings over time. But the initial casting is still cheaper than buying them. And then I feel like I'm getting lost in my direction. Yeah. And so our budget has descriptions, and that's available. We can give you a link if you want to leave a place to contact you. You can get it online. It's posted on our website. Yeah. And then we have non-potable water infrastructure projects. I'll give you my card. And if you have some questions, feel free to call. And then we have pipeline projects, non-potable. So we're working on implementing recycled water with the city of Beaumont, and so on and so forth. And so everything cast down to these numbers, and those are sort of what we need to do to move the world forward. So yeah. And every project has a number. Every project ties to a map, and you can look graphically on where each project lands. And so what we've done over the last decade or 15 years is created sort of a total roadmap for success for the water district to make sure we can meet the needs of the community. So we appreciate you coming too. Happy to answer any other questions. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, Sanjay, you think anything else we haven't covered? I'm the general manager. My name is Dan. If you want to reach out, I'm happy to dialogue further. We also have a public hearing on April 24th. Our board will consider these things. If you have future thoughts, come on down. They're certainly interested in hearing the community's thoughts on it. I expect we'll have some attendance. I'm surprised. I was here for the last rate study, and on tonight's version, we had 30 or 40 people in the room, and we answered a fair number of questions, but we appreciate your attention. So, all right. And I'll end there. Thank you.
I think with that, we'll conclude the meeting. Conclude the recording, Robert.